name is Shawn Michael. I am 48 and I currently reside in Springfield, Missouri. I have lived in 26 states and several countries, and I've been to every state. My stepfather and my mom had run a business on eBay selling classic car parts, and they were obviously severely impacted by this because it's just the two of them. So I came to Missouri because I needed to get away from everything. And they needed help, and so I just came to help. And then, as all good stories end, I met a girl, and here I am in Missouri now since 2009. So it's a very interesting journey, and certainly not where I thought I'd end up. I have been diagnosed with stage 4 colorectal cancer. It was a accidental and, I will say, very lucky finding. I was scheduled to have a colonoscopy in January of 2024. Things were a bit crazy for us at the time, just because of a lot of things that were going on personally and financially. And at the time, was really stressed, and there was a lot of things going on, and I was like, I will do this later. So fast forward to the end of October, and I started having some bowel issues. I felt impacted and thought that I was constipated. But none of the over-counter remedies worked. So I ended up going into the urgent care where they did all their checks and said, yeah, let's did an x-ray. The x-ray techs were like, we don't really see anything major. So they gave me basically a recipe for, the only way I can describe it is napalm for your intestines. Came home, actually stopped at Walmart on the way home, bought all the stuff, Gatorade and just a whole concoction of citric, I forget all of it, honestly. But I mixed it all together like some potion and drank it, and it worked really, really well. But 2 days later, I could physically feel something inside of me. Like, it hurt so bad. And so initially I was thinking that maybe what had happened, and I don't know, I don't want to be too gross, but it is how this whole process all began. I started to think that maybe there was a blockage in there, and the stuff that I was drinking was thinning out the stuff in my bowels enough that it was moving around that blockage. But whatever that blockage was so hard and compacted that it just wasn't having an effect. So I was kind of concerned that it might turn into something they were going to have to remove. But the pain was excruciating. And I was downstairs with my wife. I cracked open a can of LaCroix because I happen to love carbonated beverages. I took one sip, and it felt like someone shot me in the gut. It was so painful. I almost dropped the can. I ended up actually crushing it and spilling some of it. So I told my wife something's not right. So I sat on the couch, and all I did was writhe back and forth. So I ended up going back to the urgent care, who then connected me over to the ER, and they did a CT this time instead. And when I came back, I was just sitting in the office room waiting, and a nurse came in, and she's like, hey, how you doing? Sorry for the wait. So I'm going to read you something here. I just want to make sure that I read it right off the paper. So take your time. If you need me to explain anything or you need me to pause at any point, let me know. And at that point, she had me kind of scared. And that's when she informed me that the indications there were for stage 4 colon cancer. So within minutes, a doctor came in, a surgeon came in to talk to me. And at that point, I realized something was serious. Just because I've been to hospitals before. When I was a kid, I spent a great deal of time in them with my mom. And nothing happens fast in medical unless there's a problem. So when all of a sudden the surgeon was in the room, that it became really, really real. And at that point, the only thing I could think about was, how do I tell my wife? Because she's sitting at home waiting for me to come home from this visit. And she does not do surprises at all. She does not like to wait to find out anything. So I knew I was going to have to call my wife on the phone and say, hey, I need you to come to the hospital. I have cancer. And that was a rough phone call. And and it didn't take long. And of course, she got together and rushed down with my son and one of her best friends. But the whole time, all I could think about was how she was taking that, how she was going to process that. Um, and so that was it, it was quite the, I don't know, weight on my head at that point. She got there and we talked to the surgeon. He explained that the CT showed a huge blockage and that he needed to get it out immediately. He took me into surgery and removed the blockage by taking out a large portion of my colon in a colectomy, and then putting in a stoma at that point, temporarily. I say temporarily because that is my positive thinking. They've explained that due to my age, my metabolic health, and the process of treatment plan that we have in place, with that, they'll be able to reverse the stoma when it's done, so I can kind of go back to normal a little bit. Once I woke up from surgery, I was bitter and cranky, in a lot of pain, and way too impatient to find out what the doctor had found while he was in there. So he had explained that they saw, when he originally, before the surgery, had explained everything and kind of drawn it out on the wall on the whiteboard. He tried to explain how my insides were constructed in there and some of the things they saw. One of the things that concerned him was there was a bunch of nodules that he couldn't quite explain, that he was worried were tumors attached to other tissue. And he says he wouldn't be able to know for sure until he actually got in there. So after surgery, when I woke up and they got the surgeon down there to speak with me, I kind of explained a couple things. And so when he got in there, it turns out that, bear with me because I'm not a surgeon. I'm just kind of going off the education I've received through online and the surgeon in this process. But there's a huge flap of fat that kind of moves around the colon to help protect it there, called the omentum. And attached to the omentum were a number of very large, like, cancer tumors. So that is what he had seen in there. And he said that that actually was kind of a lucky break, that it attached to that fatty tissue there, and that had been able to help slow down the progression to the other organs. So while he was in there, he not only resected a large part of my colon, including the section where the obstruction was, but also the omentum and all of that attached tissue as well. There were 33 lymph nodes or 34 lymph nodes, and of those, 7 of them had tumorous tissue attached to them, so they removed those. And then he explained that the obstruction that was in my colon at the time was so large, he was absolutely shocked that it hadn't ruptured yet. He said he'd never seen an obstruction that large that hadn't already ruptured the wall and spilled out into the abdominal cavity. So we got really, really lucky on timing on getting it out of there. So he took out the vast majority of the colon. Obviously, he performed the ostomy and then took out the omentum as well. But he also made note that while they were in there, they took tissue samples and checked a couple of the things out, and that he had some concerns about some additional tissue in there, that we were going to get some labs taken back. But as far as he was concerned, they took a good deep look at everything while they were in there. And to his knowledge, they got every single bit of gross infected tissue that they could find. So everything that they could visibly see cancer on had been cut out, which was a good thing to me. That was quite reassuring. It wasn't until we got some of the other stuff back that we realized it was a little worse than we expected. His additional labs showed that at that point that it had passed the peritoneal divide, and so I had some cancerous tissue build up on my liver and spleen and my lung. So that is where it's sitting currently, and that's what we're hoping to kind of kill off with chemo. So we started talking about options and processes and the kind of way to go about it, and some of the things that not necessarily to be scared about. He was very clear about making sure I understood that he didn't see in any way, shape, or form a reason for us to be terribly concerned right now about, a timeline. That he felt due to my age, obviously, and then my metabolic health, that there was a very good shot at fighting this and killing it. So our plan currently is to do 3 months of chemo instead of 6 months. So we'll be doing 6 treatments instead of 12. The primary reason for that is that for the vast majority of people who receive the chemo, the effect that the chemo can have on the actual tumors themselves, as far as the overall spectrum of what it's going to be doing to those cells, is accomplished within that time frame. A lot of doctors choose to continue to bombard it with the chemo, just sort of like make sure that they're dead. But it's hard on the body, and for a lot of people, it's really hard on the mental health side of things. It can wear you down, and he didn't want to do that unnecessarily. So we definitely need the chemo treatment. That's given, but he wants to minimize the amount of time that I have to be going through chemo, both for my body and for my mind. And then once those 3 months are up, I've got a referral to go see a physician in St. Louis who works for Barnes. And another thing that made me feel really comfortable is he knows this surgeon personally. They went to school together. So I got a direct referral rather than just getting fed into the cancer patient pool that they pull from. And they're going to do a HIPEC and procedure. And so between the 3 months of chemo, the 6 individual treatments, and then the HIPEC, the intent there is to essentially eradicate it from my system completely. I got a port put in. That's not something I'll ever go through again. It is annoying and painful. I thought it was going to be an external thing, like, you know what I mean? No joke. And bear with me, when I pictured a port, I pictured like a small appliance that would be fitted inside your chest that had maybe a valve on it. And after getting this installed, I'll call it, after having this put in, the logic of that started to go, oh my God, people would die left and right if it was just a valve that was outwardly accessible. Like, you know what I mean? But that's what I was picturing when they said port. So it actually gets in, it was inserted through my neck, through the carotid artery, and then it goes down underneath my chest. There's actually you can feel the lump where the port itself is. And the way it works is the chemo gets administered through a small attachment that has a needle that pokes down through it. So it just centers over that and latches down onto it and punctures through the skin into that. Supposedly, for those who are cancer patients who've been through this process, it is significantly less of a nuisance and less hard on the body than constantly having IVs installed, every couple of weeks, less blown out veins, things like that. It is super painful still. And that's because where it's located, this incision here on the neck, there are still the very ends of 2 small parts of the sutures that come out, and you can feel them twing. And that happens to rest exactly where the collar line of every frickin' shirt I own is. And so it is constantly rubbing against that, and it is such a nuisance. I have a great deal of faith in the efficacy of this process. So I am all about this. If there's a chance that this will kill it for good, I'm all about it. So it'll just mean a long road for healing. Long road. I think I internalize a lot of things personally. So when we talk about mental, for the most part, I don't see being affected by many things mentally. Not in the sense that you would typically think, like depression, crying, things like that. I've had a few moments where I'm just like, I'm just done. Like when I start thinking about the process down the road, the chemo and the emotional drain and the physical drain. But some of the things that affect me the most are I'm a very, not necessarily physically active in the form of working out person, but I'm a very active person as far as like staying busy, work, house, things like that. And this has put me lounging around my freaking house for the last month, and I am going absolutely stir crazy. And so what I find myself doing is waiting for everyone else to be gone because it's the only time I can do it without being nagged or yelled at. And starting to work on various projects around the house. Anything I can do to try to stay busy. The areas where it's felt the most downtrodden are in this lack of ability to obviously be a part of this process and fighting it, if that makes sense. We've got to rely on the medicine and the doctors who are experts to do that part. But the lack of the inability to do things for myself, the things I have to have help with, and the amount of time I have to spend just not doing something, which is highly frustrating. I told my best friend the other day, I was like, there is nothing like being working through a 65-hour week. It's a long week. You're staying busy, but you're like, man, I wish I could just get like 3 solid hours in a block instead of 15 minutes here and there where I could sit down and play video games. Like I would love to work my way back through this section of Assassin's Creed or whatever, right? When all you have is time, I find it hard to pick up a controller to entertain myself at times because I don't feel like I've earned it. Like, you know what I mean? Like I don't want to do that. I want to go do something that's constructive. So it's a weird hump that you go over, and kind of a weird feeling that it puts in you. It's totally different than, like, say for example, when you're drained from the flu. You know that feeling. Um, you still feel drained, but it's more mentally because of the things in your life that are changed and you don't have any control over. So my wife she works as a high school counselor in a local community. So her job is very stressful. There's days where she's messaged me in the middle of the day and she's like, I can't, like, I don't even know if I can make it the rest of the hours this day. You know, I'm like, have you got this? Um, so for what she does when she comes home, she's so mentally drained. And anybody who's done something that's mentally draining knows, like, I'll work a 12-hour day of physical labor before I do a 5.5, 6-hour day of something that's mentally straining. It's less hard on your body. And so she deals with a lot. And so for her to go from the way she has been for years, once she found out this, she just became, I don't know, she transformed into some form of spousal cancer warrior. She has kicked in, like, she has helped with emergency stoma changes, which is just, if you knew her, you would know what a absolutely insane thing that is for her to do. Just because it's gross and it's, you know what I mean? It's not something that anyone wants to have to do. And she's there to help every step of the way. She checks on me regularly and consistently. And I think that seeing the changes in her and how she's willing to support without breaking down and losing it, you know, has been a huge boost to me. I'm seeing another side of her come out, and I love it. And I appreciate that. So it just reminds me of who's there to fight for, you know, to stick around. And then, honestly, one of the biggest blessings is knowing that I don't have leukemia, I don't have brain cancer, there are so many cancers that kill so quick, and that people suffer so bad from. And so, for lack of a better way to put it, a lot of times I feel like I have a baby cancer. It's just a little one. You know what I mean? And I know there's no such thing as a little cancer, but compared to other people, I have been running back through my mind constantly that it could be so much worse. And I think that also really helps me. No one's pulled me aside and say, hey, this is what we're looking at. Yes, it's metastasized. Yes, it's stage 4. Unfortunately, we're looking at, 12 months or, 3 months. I've never had to deal with that. I can't imagine that conversation. And so that has also given me a lot of motivation, just in the sense that I realize that I would be squandering the hell out of the opportunity to fight this if I didn't put my all into it when there are people who aren't given an opportunity. Watching videos on TikTok and YouTube of other cancer survivors was the one thing that helped me put into perspective what I was potentially looking at in fighting this after my diagnosis. Doctors can say all the things in the world. They can show you all the scientific journals. They can print out all the paperwork on things. You can WebMD things to death. I've always said because I help customers make buying decisions, especially during like back to school and things like that. Marketing and advertising tools can only tell you so much. It tells you all the things they want you to think are amazing, so you'll buy the product. And when it comes to diseases like cancer, you pull up WebMD, it's going to tell you all the things that are bad, right, about this, how it destroys the body, how it goes through. And you can only read so many things about treatments to go, okay, that is a available thing, if that makes sense. But hearing it directly from somebody who's had to suffer through it, someone who's been through a thing, that's the only way that you can truly get a sense for how it affects, because it's a whole picture, like you've mentioned earlier. It is physical, it is mental, it's emotional, and it's not just for you. It's friends, it's family members, and so being able to read stories from people and read their descriptions of procedures, listen to them talk about their recovery process, their treatment process, gave me a much better picture of what I would be looking at personally. It's part of what helped me come to an understanding that my cancer is nowhere near as severe as some people's. And even though it's currently stage 4, there is hope that they will still be able to eradicate and remove all of that tissue successfully. I think communication is a huge one. Don't bottle anything up. Like I said, this disease itself, I've read too many horror stories and so many victory stories. But the one thing I've learned is it will take a lot from you. It'll take emotional drain, on your body. It'll take a physical drain on your body. For some people, it'll take your life. Don't let it take your relationships. Don't let it take your sanity. Do everything you can to find ways to find your happy spot. Do things that make you happy. And do homework. If you're afraid of something, look it up. Talk to someone. Find out whether or not that's really something you need to be scared about or not. Don't let everything stew in here, because this is so overwhelming. This disease carries a stigma with it that is just unparalleled. So I just think it's important to make sure that you're focusing not just on, following doctor's orders and getting well and maintaining your appointments and your calls and all that, but that you're making sure that you're keeping yourself happy, and you're communicating with the people who care, just to make sure everybody's in the loop. Because you never know when you're going to really have one of those days where everything has been perfect for 3 weeks and that day sucks so bad and all you want is to talk to somebody about it. And so take advantage of those opportunities.